Hello everyone. So welcome to the fifth tutorial of the tutorial series, and this one we are going to move on to the topic called loops, the repetition in Python, right? So in Python we have two main types of loops. So what do you mean by a loop, and what a loop? I mean, where we can use loops. So simply, if you want to run a set of codes or a single code or set of instructions, let's say a set of codes simply repeatedly, if you want to run the same thing again and again, so then you can use loops. And in Python we have two main types of loops: for loops and while loops, similar to the other programming languages as well, right? So first we will check the for loop and see how the for loop is executed. So now this is simply how we are going to define a for loop, right, in Python. Now let's say for example, if I want to print something like this, right? So let's say I'm going to print uh, hello world, right? Hello world. Okay. So now that printed once. So if you want to print this 10 times, what you can do is simply you can include the you can type this code 10 times. That's also a possibility. But if you want to write this, I mean output this 1,000 times, you can't always write the same thing 1,000 times, but you can use a loop like this: for I in range 0, 10, 1. So this is what you call the loop, the for loop to be exact, in Python. Now I made this print in, to be inside of the for loop by keeping a tab, right? So if you run this now, you will see the same thing is executed 10 times. And make sure that you are going to identify this I and these three parameters given in the for loop. So I, similar to the other programming languages, this I is actually called the loop control variable. So this is not only for Python, in other programming languages as well, we call them as the loop control variable. So I, this variable controls the loop. So I decides how many times this loop will run. So that's dependent on the I and these three values, right? So these three values, the first value simply initialize the starting value of the I, right? And the uh, second value 10 here, for example, this marks the upper limit of the I, the maximum value that I can go. Now you can remember from the last tutorials, upper limit in Python always less than 1. I mean 1 less than the upper limit given, right? And this is the increment of the I. So in order to understand this clearly, we will print I and see what happens and what are the outputs, right? So you can see this loop iterates through, I mean the loop several times, right? So for example, here what happens, I value starts from 0, right? So that's the initial value, and it go up to 9, not 10. 1 minus 10, 9, right? And this is the increment, or this is the step. Actually this is the step, right? So I start from 1 and it go up to 9 with intervals of 1 plus 1. So what happened, I goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So that's what happens. So here what this means, right? For like, let's say example, okay, 0 to 20 or 0 to 100, right? 2. Now what this means, go from 0 to, right, 100 with increments of 2. So you will see that this will run 50 times, right? Since the increment is not 1, it's 2. So 2-step increments will be done. So this will be executed 50 times, right? This will be executed 50 times, 0, 2, 4, 6, likewise. Understood? So now the other thing, so you can use the starting value, ending value, and the increment simply. So if you start from 10, like 10, and if you go up to 0 and minus 2. So now what happens? Start from 10, go up to 0 with minus 2 increments, right? 10, 2, 6, 4, right? So understood. So I hope that you can remember what happens here, right? And now I want to show you that block thing. Now if you include another thing here, let's say, right? Okay, So now both of these are inside the for loop, right? Since the same tab is given here. Now if you run this one, what happens? Okay, it simply prints I first, then hello world. I, hello world. So the second time I will be 8, hello world, likewise. But if you mistakenly do something like this, error, and if you remove the tab, now this is no more inside the for loop, it's outside the for loop. So this loop will run 5 times, and then at the end of the loop this will be printed, right? So since it's not inside the for loop, right? So simply this is how we are going to implement the for loop in Python. So what you have to do is provide the loop control variable and give 3 parameters to it: the starting value, the ending value, and right. So according to these values, the I decides how many times this loop will run and the value of I, right? Okay, but thing is, this is called the full form of the for loop, right? So 3 parameters: starting value, ending value, I mean the upper limit, and the increment or the step. But actually no need to always give 3 values. You can do it using, 3 values, you can do it using 1 value as well. For example, you can do it like this: for I in range, right, 0 to 10. Now if you give 2 values, the first value will be taken as the starting value and the second value will be taken as the upper limit or the ending value. So the increment, we haven't give the increment here. So what happens to the increment? Increment will be assigned to default 1, right? So if you are not going to provide the third parameter, the increment, that will be assigned to default 1, right? So here this will simply go from 0 to 10. Still it works. And another version, the most commonly used and the version that we are always using is this one, only providing 1 value. Not 2, not 3, only 1 value. So if you are going to give 1 value, that simply says, right, this simply says the ending value. So now, if you are going to provide only 1 value, that means we are providing the ending value. So what about the starting value and the increment? Both of them will be assigned to default. So the increment will be 1 plus 1, and the decrement will be, the starting value will be 0. Right? So if you most of our applications, we are going to use loops starting with 0 and having increments of 1. What we always change is the upper limit, right? So this is the most commonly used method, but you have to keep this in mind. This is the full form. So if you somehow want to get a modified for loop, like so, according to some, due to some applications, you have to change the starting value, ending value, and increment, and the increment is minus value. In that kind of a situation, you can use the full form. Otherwise, for common applications, we always use this version where it takes only 1 parameter, right? Okay, so then we are going to move on to the while loop. In while loop, the situation is quite simple and the same like the while loop in other programming languages. So how you can implement a while loop? So all 3 values will be there: the starting value, the ending value, and the increment, but they are given separately like this. So first you have to give the initial value of the loop control variable like this. Then you have to check the condition here, right? So let's say I less than 10, right? So this is the condition to be checked, the upper limit. Then you can print the I and C. Now this loop will run infinite times since we haven't mentioned the increment. So I equal I plus 1. So this is the increment, right? So if you are using I plus plus, like in other programming languages, this is not available in Python, right? So instead you can use this, like I plus equal 1. Sorry, I plus equal 1. So this can be used, or I equal I plus 1 can be used, but not I plus plus. It's not working in Python, right? Understood? So if you want to have an infinite loop which runs forever, right? So you can do it like this. Either you can give and so while 1, so the condition is always true, right? So it's 1, true. So now what happens? This is an infinite loop. So you can see it's a never-ending loop, right? Runs forever, right? Or else you can do the same thing using the true. So while true, also you can do this while true, print hello, right? Understood. So that's how we are going to implement a for loop. I mean, infinite life while loop. Now, while loop is not used that much in Python, in not usual, but we use it. But most of the application we use the while loop to have an infinite loop, right? When we have infinite loop, we use a while loop. Other than that, we always try to use the for loop since it is quite straightforward to use. But when it comes to infinite loops, probably we will use while loops, right? Other than that, in Python, mostly use loop is for loop, right? Okay, so then, yeah, so then we have discussed a few things about the loops, for loop actually to be exact. Now, here you can see that we have declared a list for my list, and we have something like this, right? And what we'll do here is that we go from, I mean, we change the I in range of 0, I mean 0, 6. So what happens? I change from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? So in that case, we print my list I, right? So you know what happens here. This kind of a thing will happen. I in range, length of my list, let's say. So length of my list is simply 6. So I'll go, I will iterate through, you know that I will iterate for 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5, right? Since the length is 6 here, right? So I'll go from 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 and 5. So what we print here is my list I. So my list I is like my list 0. First time we print my list 0, so that means 1, 2, 3, and my list 1, so that's 4, 4, 5, and my list 2, so that's 5, 3, 4, and my list 3, 5, 5, 2, my list 4, 44. Likewise, we print those values, right? And the other method, so this is a simply used method in other programming languages as well to print arrays, right? So this is the common method used in other programming languages as well in order to print arrays, right? Print arrays. But when it comes to Python, right? So Python has other different method as well. So now in the second one, it's given, right? Here you can see that we have the same list, and can you see the difference between the for I in range 6 and here? I mean, this can be always written as length of my list as well, right? Okay, so my list length gives the length of the list. You can remember from the last tutorial, right? So here, this prints the elements of the list, right? You can see the elements of the list. And here, what happens here? For I in my list, right? So can you see the difference? For here, I in range 6, my length of my, I mean, length of my list, whatever the length of this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 11, right? But here, we are not going to do that. What happens here? I in range 11. So what happens? I start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But here, we don't do something like that. We directly do for I in my list. Can you see the difference? Now, in this case, what happens? I don't iterate like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But what happens to I changes from, I mean, I will be assigned to first this, then I will become this, then I will become this. So I will be assigned to the elements of the array. Now, earlier one, I become 0, 1, 2, 3, and you print my list 0, my list 1, my list 2, likewise. But here, for I in my list, what we will do is simply we assign the value of the, I mean, the elements of the list to the I, right? So I become simply 1 2 3 4 5 4 5 3 4 5 2 4 4 3 2. Likewise, I directly becomes value of the elements, right? So here you can see we print my list I, but here no, we print I. So I becomes the values of that list, right? So if you run this, you will see the same kind of output, right? So here also another example is given for I in array. So I becomes first this, secondly this, thirdly this, right? So I changes to the value of the array. So I is assigned to the values of the array, right? So this is what happens here now. So if you do it like this, that means I becomes the values of the my list, right? So this is an advanced usage of loops with lists in Python, and also the tuples. So same thing can be done. And one other thing, we can use loops in order to create arrays as well, right? So here I will do something like this: I for I in range 10, right? So if you see the output, you can see something like this, right? So if you run this one, you can see something like this. So what happens here? I for I in range 10. So if you can see the loop is 0 1 2 3, I mean the array is 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, right? So here what happens, if you want to understand this, you have to identify this array like this. You have to divide this into two parts. So the first part is this. So this is a normal loop that you know, right? So what happens here, that loop will run 10 times and I changes from 0 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, right? So the loop, the number of times the loop run, that decides the number of elements in the array. So this is run 10, this will run 10 times, so there will be 10 values in the array, right? 10 values in the array, and this value given here decides the value assigned to the list at each iteration of the loop. Now this means the array will iterate 10 times in the loop. Sorry, the loop iterates 10 times, so that's what it means. The loop iterates 10 times, so that's what this loop means. And each time, this is the value that will be assigned to the loop array, right? So if you use this method to create an array, right, for each iteration of the loop, one value will be assigned to the array, right? And this is the variable, or this is the value that decides the value to be assigned to that array, right? So that's what you can see it like this. Now, then you will understand actually if I do it like this, right? So now how are we going to identify this? This will run 10 times, and this is the value that will be assigned to this list each time. So each iteration 0 will be, so this iterates 10 times, and each time 0 will be assigned. So you are going to see 0 tens, 10 zeros, right? 10 zeros. So if you do something like this, okay, let's say minus 10 to plus 10 with plus 2 increments, and I'm going to have like I into I, right? So there will be 10 values, and those will be like this, right? You can understand, right? Understood. Okay, so then I will show you how we can use this break statement inside loops, right? Break and the continue and everything, right? So let me get a simple example and explain you how to use this continue and also the break, right? So for example, let us take this one, right? And then for value in numbers. So what happens, you know what happens here, right? So the value will be first 11, then 33, then 55, then 39. Likewise, value will be changed. So if you run this one, you are going to see the values are printed like this. And now I'm going to explain you how to use loop control statements. So what I mean by loop control statements, we have main 3 loop control statements in Python. So what it means, inside the loop, we can use these statements to control the loop. So we have 3 main types: break, continue, and pass. We will take each and explain what happens, right? So let me check a condition here, right? Let me check a condition. So if the value is, let's say, 10, right? So now you know that this loop iterates through each and every element of this list, right? And each time we check whether the value, that means the values in this array is equal to 10, right? So if it is the case, I'm going to break the loop, right? So you can see the early output, it prints all the values in the loop, right? So earlier, if you don't have this, when you don't have this loop, so this simply prints all the values, right? But let me do something like this. I will include the if condition, right, like this. Right? And what I do here simply, right, I'll check, and if the value is equals to 10, I'll print, not print, I will break the loop, right? So now what happens, you can see only these values. So this one, so we check it, the condition is not satisfied, and this one, the condition is not satisfied, this one not satisfied, this one not satisfied. So those are printed. So here the condition is satisfied, the value becomes 10. In that case, we break the loop. As the name suggests, what do you do here? What the break condition, break statement simply does is, it breaks the loops and it stops the iteration of the loop, right? So it stops and it terminates the repetition of the loop, right? So when this condition satisfies, we terminate the running loop. Now, if this was not there, all the values will be printed, you know that, right? But here, since we have to check a condition and we include this break, what happens is that when this condition is true, the loop will be broken, right? And similarly, we have another condition called continue. So what happens in continue? So you can see, right? So everything is printed, right? No, everything is printed except 10. So what happens when this loop iterates? If this condition is satisfied, then it continues. So in the usual case, what happens? This condition checks, and if it is not true, this will be executed, right? Likewise. But here, what happens when this condition is false? Continue simply skips one iteration, right? It skips one iteration. So that means it skips that iteration and go back and skip and go from the next value, right? So continue simply skip one iteration. If the condition is satisfied, it skips the current iteration and go to the next iteration. So simply that means when the 10 is found, that is skipped and it goes to 75. So that's kind of a thing happening in continue. And simply the other one, actually no need to discuss as well. It's simply the pass does nothing, right? So it does nothing. So when the 10 is found, it does nothing, it's just pass. So it's similar to like not having this one here, right? So pass, simply pass it. It makes no difference to the loop, just pass it, right? Makes no change. So pass statement, Python when statements required syntactically, but you don't want any command or code to be executed, right? So it makes no change. Not any command or code will be executed. It's there. Syntactically, it's there, but nothing happens, right? Okay, so that's those are the things that I need to discuss. And yeah, so we have a set of questions here, right? Set of questions here. So what I'll do here is that I will let these questions, I will let you to try these questions yourself, right? And I will provide you some time. And later, I will provide the answers for these questions using a tutorial, another tutorial. So what you can do is simply implement codes. So I'm not going to help you. You can implement your own codes, and then after I provide you the answers, you can compare with your answers, with my answers, and get check whether what you have done is correct, right? So I will keep these questions for you. Now these questions are simply based on the things that we implemented in loops, repetition, right? And also and the decision making, and as well as variables. The all the things that we covered up to now will be are included in this set of questions. So please try these questions, and I will provide the answers in due course. Okay, so thank you very much, and we will meet on the next tutorial with Python functions.